Hello everyone! Thanks for joining me today for an obscure little book-to-film adaptation discussion featuring a mostly forgotten British film, 1950's The Reluctant Widow, also known as The Inheritance, which was based on a novel by Georgette Heyer. Georgette Heyer was a leading English writer of historical fiction in the middle part of the 20th century. She's often cited as the creator of the Regency romance, though she wrote Georgian romances too, as well as some non-romantic works of historical fiction, some contemporary fiction, and a dozen detective novels. She also happens to be one of my favorite authors. Among her fans, Heyer's works are beloved for their fun dialogue, their endearing characters, their smooth integration of period-appropriate clothing and slang, and their amusing, thrilling, mysterious, and above all, engaging plots. With all these worthy attributes, you might assume her books would make prime candidates for screen adaptations. Well, she did dip her toe in the water by selling the rights to her 1946 novel, The Reluctant Widow. The resulting film, in Heyer's eyes, was disastrous. She so disliked it that she vowed she would never give up the rights to one of her books again. It does appear she made one exception, as a German adaptation of Arabella was made in 1959, although if this poster is any indication, the film wasn't set in the right time period at all. For the remainder of her life, Heyer kept her resolve, her feelings so adamant that she stipulated in her will that even after her death, the rights to her books would never be sold, and her estate has faithfully upheld that stipulation. And that's why my screenplay for an adaptation of Devil's Cub that I wrote in 12th grade will never see the light of day. When I was in my teens, tearing through every Georgette Heyer book I could get my hands on, I spent a lot of time on the fan website, and I found out that there was this notorious film adaptation. And I eventually found an upload of it on YouTube. I don't know when this was. It might have been around 2009, 2010. It was definitely before 2014, which is when I started keeping track of the movies I watched. Out of curiosity, I sat down and watched it, and I don't think that I thought much of it, although I admit I wasn't without prejudice, since I knew about Heyer's dislike and its reputation among Heyer fans, and I was already partial to the book, which I had read. After a while, though, I forgot pretty much everything about it and went on my merry way, until a few months ago, when a conversation with a friend and fellow Georgette Heyer admirer reminded me of it, and I said, "Ugh, that movie, yikes." And then I thought about it some more, and I realized that I no longer had any recollection of what exactly was wrong with it. And then I started to wonder if it was really that bad. The version of the movie that I had watched disappeared from YouTube at some point, but someone else uploaded the film a year ago. It's got a subtitle overlay, foreign subtitles, I think they're Greek, but the original English audio is intact, and while the quality is not great, it's watchable, so I decided to check it out again. But first, I reread the book. My copy of the book is this dull and shabby hardcover. It is a first edition, but it's it's pretty beat up. It was a university library copy, and there's no dust jacket, and it smells kind of funny, and the cardboard is a little compromised. It's got this big stain on the front, but you know what? The pages are really soft, they feel nice, and it was pleasant to turn them, and it doesn't smell that bad, and it has sentimental value. So even though The Reluctant Widow has gotten a reprint in the last decade or so, as have most of Georgette Heyer's books, I'd just as soon hold on to this copy. The Reluctant Widow is about an impoverished 26-year-old governess, Eleanor Rochdale, on her way to a new employer when she finds herself mistaken for someone else. A gentleman named Lord Carlion has advertised for a young lady to marry his ne'er-do-well cousin Eustace, who hates him, so that he, Lord Carlion, won't inherit his cousin's estate. He tries to persuade her to get on board with his plan, assuring her that because of his lifestyle, Eustace isn't likely to live long, and she won't have to do anything untoward, but she refuses. However, when Lord Carlion's younger brother Nicky accidentally stabs Eustace in a fight, Lord Carlion whisks Eleanor to Eustace's deathbed and convinces her to marry him just before he dies. Things get even crazier when it turns out that Eleanor's new, now-deceased husband, in addition to being in debt and having a ramshackle old house, was actually participating in some sketchy activities involving a stolen memorandum and spies for Napoleon. This discovery leads to a series of adventures involving a late-night intruder, a secret passageway, a hilarious but badly behaved dog, and a case of murder. It's good stuff. Probably not one of my favorite Georgette Heyer novels, but it's up there, maybe top 10. This was my third time reading it. I don't especially remember the first time, but the second time I was reading it on a plane, and it kept making me laugh. Most of the books that I've taken on planes turned out to be funny, and that includes this one, and a couple Terry Pratchett books, a couple Jasper Fforde books. Hopefully I never disturbed my fellow passengers with my chortling. Now let's transition to talking about the film. The Reluctant Widow, or The Inheritance, was a 1950 British production directed by Bernard Knowles. In the 30s, Knowles had worked as a photographer for Alfred Hitchcock. He shot The 39 Steps, Secret Agent, Sabotage, Young and Innocent, and Jamaica Inn. Later in his career, he worked predominantly as a television director. The Reluctant Widow stars Jean Kent as Eleanor Rochdale and Guy Rolfe as Lord Carlion. The other most noteworthy member of the cast is probably Kathleen Byron, playing Madame de Chevreau, a supporting character who was not in the book. The screenplay was adapted from the book by Basil Boothroyd and Gordon Wellesley. Wellesley's biggest claim to fame is that he wrote the story on which 1940's Night Train to Munich was based. So yesterday I watched the film, and it was an awful experience. I didn't like it at all. Let me pause here to caution you that I am about to go into some detail about what happens in the movie. Though I don't recommend it, I don't want anyone who didn't want to hear these details to be taken by surprise. And I don't want to give anything away if you're inclined to read the book either, which is worth reading, so consider yourself warned. Okay, let's start with a few positive comments. The introduction to the house is appropriately eerie and mysterious. The housekeeper's unfriendly, the set's a little run down, there's a cold atmosphere, and Lord Carlion's looming shadow in the background is portentous. The scene where the Frenchman shows up looking for Eustace is pretty well done, and Scott Forbes as Eustace's cousin Francis gives an engaging performance. Now for the things I didn't like so much. This is going to be a mix of inconsequential nitpicks and more substantial issues. I considered sorting them, but in the end it made more sense to just list them all together in somewhat chronological order. So here goes! It gets off to a rocky start, opening with a monologue that's supposed to set the scene, but something about the chirpy way Jean Kent delivers her lines is grating, and while it's supposed to clarify what's going on, I still felt a little confused. When the mistaken identity issue is cleared up, Lord Carlion immediately agrees to take Eleanor back without trying to persuade her to go along with his plan. Gone is youngest brother Nicky's explanation of how he got kicked out of school and all the fun dialogue that accompanies it. For some reason, they changed the cause of Nicky's fight with Eustace. In the book, Eustace had said something nasty about his brother, and Nicky, who was loyal to a fault, defended him. In the film, Nicky was defending the honor of a young lady that Eustace was attempting to harass, and that lady was Eleanor. This bit I wasn't 100% sure about because the dialogue wasn't exactly clear, but I think they made it that getting married to stop Carlion from inheriting his property was Eustace's idea. What? The film has some awkward and abrupt tonal shifts. Something dark will be happening, and then we fade into the next scene, and all is light and happy. They make a big deal out of Eustace's bedroom. Lord Carlion locks the door so that Eleanor can't go in there, because apparently Eustace was a bit of a pervert. They have a dramatic reveal where Eleanor goes into this den of iniquity, and she finds playing cards on the floor, some racy statues, nude paintings on the walls, and a creepy mask. prosaic middle brother John Carlion has been taken out of the story completely, and Lord Carlion and Nikki don't have much screen time together either, so a lot of the book's warmth and personality that was derived from the brotherly dynamic is gone. Nikki is also severely underutilized. Lord Carlion is for some reason made a military officer, and furthermore, this Major Carlion is arrested, tried, and found guilty of unbecoming conduct. He's stripped of rank and kicked out, apparently all as a ruse to lure a spy out of hiding. I understand it as a plot point, and I understand the thinking there. It just throws me off because I don't know where it came from. It wasn't in the book. Nobody in the book was in the military, with the possible exception of the brother Harry, who you never meet. Certainly Lord Carlion was not. In the book, the protagonists spend a lot of time together going through the house, searching for this missing document. There's nothing like that in the movie. I guess they couldn't be bothered. The film chooses to make Francis an obvious villain, but in the book, it's not clear at all. Everyone's always wondering if Francis's foppish behavior is sincere, or an affectation, or an act to cover up some dastardly deeds. He's actually a morally gray character in the book right through to the end, and the film leaves no such questions on the table. In the book, Eleanor bravely agrees to stay on at the house despite her misgivings. In the book, while Nikki, who just got shot, is being treated by the doctor, she tries to sneak out until Lord Carlion surprises her at the door. He brings with him Miss Beckles, who is supposed to be Eleanor's former governess and close friend. Instead of casting a slightly older woman, though, they cast someone younger than Eleanor, who seems very silly. Eleanor's frustration over the way Lord Carlion takes charge of everything is accurate, but the way she expresses it isn't as charming as the way she voices her exasperation in the book. Another factor of their relationship in the book is that it drives her crazy how he remains placid and unruffled no matter what strange incidents occur, and he acts as if his outlandish suggestions are perfectly logical, and everyone but Eleanor just goes along with it. She teases him about this repeatedly, and he has very good humor about it, and that's where we get some of that banter between hero and heroine that Heyer did so well. They decided not to include this dynamic in the film, and instead of being entertaining, their conversations often dissolve into a humdrum battle of wills. It's nothing that I haven't seen before, and it's not what I was looking for. The film introduces a Madame de Chevreau who has a questionable reputation and is very popular with the men. I don't think she serves much purpose. She ends up being just one more person who's looking for the document, which, by the way, is basically a MacGuffin. There's also a scene where Lord Carlion seems to be on quite cozy terms with her, implying they had a thing, which I'm sure would make Heyer want to tear her hair out. Because, while she did have her share of heroes with, reputations and pasts and all of that, Lord Carlion was not one of them. The film version of Lord Bedlington, who's more irascible than he was in the book, makes Eleanor an indecent proposal, which she staunchly rejects, and then Francis tries a couple times to seduce her with poetry. Ugh. There wasn't anything like that in the book. Everybody left Eleanor alone. They, were respectful of her widow's weeds, even if they had questions about whether or not she really was married to Eustace. The fact that she starts to fall for this nonsense makes me think less of her, which is a shame because Eleanor in the book is a good character, and they turned her into a ninny. There's an inquest held about Eustace's death. There's an inquest in the book, but it's mentioned, it's not a big deal, and Eleanor doesn't attend. Here, she testifies. Eustace's uncle claims he was murdered and insinuates that Lord Carlion is Eleanor's lover and they conspired to kill Eustace. The coroner does not find that to be a valid theory, valid accusation, and the uncle threatens to go to a higher court to prove it. So, on the way back from the inquest, Lord Carlion proposes that he and Eleanor get married so they won't be able to testify against each other. This got a big what from me, because this isn't the way it's supposed to be. The proposal's not supposed to come until the very end, and it's not supposed to be like this, and this guy is not acting like the character at all. When this happened in the movie, I almost fell over. Granted, he intends it to be a secret marriage of convenience, but still. And then she gets offended and spooks the horse, so it takes off with him, and he uses this to fake an injury and has her called to his bedside late at night in her nightgown, good heavens, on the pretense that he's dying. They're left alone, scandalously. She professes her love for him, and they kiss, and I can't believe this. A priest comes in and marries them on the spot. The same priest who just a couple days ago, I think, married her to Eustace, and it's so ridiculous. After the priest leaves, he reveals that he was faking it, and it was all a sham just to get her to marry him, and I don't know why this would even work, and it's so silly, and that's not what the book is, and it's around this point that the film strays into adaptation in name-only territory. The following night, or maybe it's a couple nights later, I'm not sure because the time frame is pretty loosey-goosey here, Frances sneaks into Eleanor's bedroom when she's, I don't know what she's wearing, but she's not fully dressed. He starts wooing her with soppy poetry, and she's shockingly receptive to it, and that's when Lord Carlion opens the door and finds them together. Never mind that he just barges into her bedroom. She sees him at the door and decides to kiss Frances to make him jealous, which works, and then she's gloating while Frances is ushered out. It's just so... ugh. What follows is a titillating scene on the bed where Eleanor squirms all over the place, trying, but not really, to get away, while Carlion confesses his true feelings, which at this point I feel like, I don't know when you're telling the truth and when you're not. Apparently she doesn't feel that she can trust him either, because when Carlion leaves for a second to make sure that Frances got the message that they don't want to be disturbed tonight, when he comes back, Eleanor's gone into hiding because she doesn't really trust that he loves her, so even if they are technically married, she's not going to spend the night with him. I don't know. Georgette Heyer didn't write this. If this was something else, like, you know, okay, it's amusing, but it's not. It's Georgette Heyer, and she would never write anything like this. They do end up falling asleep in the same room, he on the bed, she on the couch, and the next morning, when the housekeeper, who doesn't know that technically they did get married, comes to the door and he opens it, she makes the hanky-panky assumption. He then carries a half-asleep Eleanor from the couch to the bed for an unromantic love scene, where nothing happens, but it's still no wonder that Heyer was mortified. Watching this, she must have been like, "What did you do to my story?" Anyway, when the letter does turn up, it's marked highly secret and confidential. They might as well slap a sign over it that says, "Steal me!" And apparently the writers felt that Heyer's climax wasn't exciting enough, because they added a sword fight. Sword fights happen in several of Heyer's novels, so it's not that out of the ordinary, but there's no sword fight in The Reluctant Widow. So those are some thoughts that went through my head as I watched this movie. Obviously, these are subjective opinions. If you had never read the book and you aren't a Georgette Heyer fan, you probably wouldn't have the same reaction. But I will say this. I watched it with my mom, who had never seen it before, and who has never read a Georgette Heyer novel in her life. And she didn't think much of it either. In her opinion, the film was okay, but it was irritating, and there wasn't enough information provided to clarify what was going on. There's quite a bit of debate and division when it comes to adaptations and how much say the author should have once the rights have been sold. I can see all sides to this question. I love books, and I love movies, and I've also done some writing myself. So, I understand where everybody's coming from. I understand the writer's desire to protect their brainchild. Delivering your story and your characters that you've spent so much time with and you know better than anyone into someone else's hands for them to interpret their own way is a gamble. You have to be okay with the possibility that your plot may get hacked to bits, your characters may become unrecognizable, and they may be forced to do things that you hate, and there may be a bunch of other stuff added in there that you just find repulsive in the worst case scenario. The final result may be a hit, or it may be a critical and commercial failure, and it has your name attached to it forever. With all that risk, I don't know that I would want to sell my brainchild. Maybe if they were going to let me be heavily involved in the entire creative process, but as a film fan, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think it's always beneficial to have the writer on set all the time. A lot of writers end up interfering with the filmmaking process and can create a negative environment among the cast and crew, and it can cause controversy, and so I don't think that that's a good thing. But if it was me, I would practically insist on it. I'd probably be super obnoxious. And so, yeah, I don't think I could handle this. Part of the reason why I'm so critical of this film as an adaptation is that so much of the work had been done already. The blueprint was right there, and yet they did their own thing instead. And the result is meh. It moves too fast, and the dialogue is a little hard to follow, with little charm to make up for it. The writing is lackluster, the acting is lackluster, it doesn't sparkle with wit, it's not nearly humorous enough. Moments from the book are included, but the film stops short of delivering on what made those moments memorable. And there's also not much to say aesthetically. I don't remember a single establishing shot. It feels a little bit claustrophobic or low budget, and the hair and costumes are relatively uninspiring. Besides the absurd choice to make Lord Carlion an officer, Eleanor's gowns are far too cute and pretty for someone in her situation. And when she gets new ones, which the film has Lord Carlion buy instead of her obtaining them herself, she's supposed to be in morning clothes, not frothy, frilly dresses. And I almost forgot! They completely cut out the dog! My strongest impression is how disappointed I am at the turn things take in the second half, between the absurd twists they added and their attempts to make it sexier. Heyer's historical romances are known for being clean. Some readers may find that boring, but I think it's nice. Heyer's books have the occasional suggestive moment, an allusion to a mistress or an attempted seduction, but they aren't racy. They're not sensual unless you choose to read between the lines. This film, on the other hand, has all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, and having revisited it, I perfectly understand Heyer's feelings about it. And, you know, if she was this wary in 1950, if she felt the studio in 1950 went too far for her tastes, she'd be appalled at what they might do today. So her decision to protect the rights after her death was pretty smart. I would say She died in the 70s, and I would say that she observed how the culture was changing, and she wasn't a fan of it, and she wasn't a fan of the kinds of things they were beginning to show in movies, and so she said, "Nuh-uh, that's not happening to my books." It's a loss for fans like me, who will probably never get to see these books made into movies, but I'm okay with that, because I would rather read the books than see them interpreted in a way that I don't like, and I definitely don't want to see them get sullied by Hollywood, which I don't have a very high opinion of. It's one thing for a film to do things differently. That's to be expected. I don't actually demand that a film be exactly the same as the book. That's impossible, for one thing, and it's an obstinate mindset that means no film will ever measure up to your expectations. Sometimes the changes that a film incorporates yield awesome results, and then you have both a great book and a great movie. And sometimes a film is even better than the book. It happens. It's another thing when the changes hurt the story or turn it into a mess. And if they take the story in a direction I know the writer would never have wanted it to go, then it feels kind of insulting to the writer and to the fans. Thankfully, this film is so short that it didn't drive me crazy for too long, so forgettable that it won't leave a lasting impression, and so different from the book that it doesn't ruin it. Those are my thoughts on the film adaptation of The Reluctant Widow. When I got the idea to do this video a couple weeks ago, this isn't exactly the way I thought that it would turn out, but I hope you found my indignation entertaining. I know this is a lesser-known film and an obscure topic for anyone who's not a Georgette Heyer fan, but if anyone has any thoughts on this book-to-film adaptation, go ahead and share your take on it in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.